And I'm live with Jeff. We'll
Hey,
be...
hey.
Yes, I should have let you get in there, yes. And I don't know if Morgan's here as well. We'll find out.
Yeah, he's nearby.
Right, and we're going to be looking at Aurak and the episode, the finale of Season A of Blake Seven. Now, the comedy book, Maximum Power. You're probably aware of this, Jeff, that the Doctor Who, they called their seasons like A, B, C, D, and all that kind of stuff. And
What?
you know, they called the Doctor Who seasons. They didn't call it Season 1, Season 3. They called it... What, you never knew that?
I never heard anyone call it that before you just did.
All right. But what they did in the book is they did the joke saying that, oh, people thought it was called Season A, but really it was called Season... what did they call it? Season M. And the next season was called Season N. And then they missed out Season O because apparently it looks like just the bits that they make up. So this, folks, is Aurak. And at one point in the series, someone says, "That's not Aurak. You fool, look at it. It's just a box of flashing lights." So it was actually meant to be something that didn't look tremendously impressive, but Aurak.
Wait, who were you saying? What were you saying about Doctor Who before?
I think they were saying that the seasons were called like A, B, C, D, like in alphabetical order.
In what were they called that?
Internal documentation in the BBC.
Oh. Okay.
So for instance,
that there wasn't any like public thing that called it that.
no, it was just this weird thing that they did. I have
Well, you know, not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with you like saying those things, but you know, because if it was just internal documentation, it doesn't really matter that much. In my opinion.
You know, well, it's like in the Doctor Who program guide, they had like they would do it as this. The story is as. No, in fact, what they did, they didn't list the seasons as. They each Doctor Who story was a letter. So they would call.
Yeah, I did see that on that one website I forget the name of that has like some behind the scenes information about Doctor Who.
Right.
But anyway.
Right. So Caves of Androzani is 6R.
Yeah.
Because they went
around the whole... If you want to read your little episode summary, then...
Yes. My little episode summary. Right, yeah, what I can do is I can quickly get through that because I have a slide for it. And overall, we don't have that many slides. So we can go into... right then, so... Here we go. The Liberator is en route to Aristo, delivering medical supplies to the inventor Ensor, the Elder. But the mission becomes a race against time as Avon, Villa, Gan, and Jenna begin to suffer from the radiation they were exposed to on Cephalon. No, it's Keflon. Blake and Callie teleport down to Aristo and reach Ensor Sr. before Servalan and Travis, who are also on the trail of Aurak. Ensor dies before he can reach the Liberator and bequeaths Aurak to Blake. I'll come back to that in a moment. Bequeaths Aurak to Blake along with the medicine needed to cure Blake's crew. Aurak's first demonstration is a prediction, the destruction of Liberator. Now when he says there bequeaths, all that happened is he just died and then Blake took it.
I guess that's the old school version of bequeath. Like, you know, you were the closest to him when he died, so you get his stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he did willingly take it, but, you know. Right then. So, what are your thoughts on the episode?
What are my thoughts? Overall, I think it was a good season finale because I didn't. As I've said before, I've read nothing ahead on this show, so I know nothing about anything that happens, and didn't know that they ended the season on sort of a cliffhanger in terms of what exactly they're showing or what happened. Because it's kind of abrupt, but I actually liked that because it sort of leaves you going, "Wait, what?" And then the people originally had to wait. You told me like nearly a year until they saw the
Yeah.
conclusion. So for the people that hadn't forgotten about it by then, they were on the edge of their seats to find out what happened next. But yeah, I mean, it was morning when I saw it, so it's not quite as fresh in my memory as it is usually when we're doing these. But I've lived since then, so. And you just keep showing this picture of them staring at the box. So I'm like, the box. The box must tell us things. Oh, I like Jenna's red outfit. It was nice. She had a new thing. I don't think she'd worn that one before.
Yeah. It's about a third costume, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, sparkly black and white space one is still the winner, but if you could combine that with the sort of purpley pink jeans, that would be the perfect outfit. But anyway, this red thing was all right.
Yeah. Especially without a bra.
I found myself. There was a couple of things that were weird about the Travis and the Supreme Commander scenes, and nothing to do with what you said about a stunt double being his feet or whatever. That I didn't even notice. The thing that was weird to me was a couple of things. One, Travis really seemed quite subdued from how he was before.
Yeah.
And so I guess what they were trying to indicate with that was that like his losing his command temporarily made him like really beat down seeming. I mean, I guess because he was rivaling Jeb Bush for the low energy, in that.
Yeah.
And I also thought it seemed a little out of character for Ms. Supreme Commander to have gone down to the planet herself. It seemed like she would have just sent Travis and like some other muscle or something down with him, or somebody that it was a little bit odd that she chose to just go down with just the two of them. I thought that was kind of a weird choice, and I know that she said basically she was trying to keep it a secret, I guess, from the Federation what they were doing. It still seems like they would have had like at least one or two expendable crew people she could have sent down. That, I mean, even if they were just going to kill them after they were done, because she obviously doesn't seem to care much about that anyway. So I mean, it just seemed kind of weird to set it up that way.
Yeah, they could have taken some mutoids with them because they don't talk.
Yeah, right. I mean, they're
totally loyal,
but they pretty much view those as expendable anyway. So
it
could have been like, or wouldn't even have to kill them, just like reprogram them or re-brainwash them. Oh, you didn't see anything. You didn't. That's kind of seems like an unnecessary risk for her to be taking to do that. So yeah, that allows us to have the complete I don't know what the word to say. Unnecessary is not the right word, but like she's not a character that the audience is really supposed to be like to feel for, and yet we have her like in the tunnel getting attacked by this creature. I mean, I guess maybe some of the audience is rooting for the creature to go ahead and kill her, but it's not going to. I mean, she's she was, so I mean, at least be surprising. Actually, a nice plot twist if it did happen. But for the most part, it was like I'm like this seemed like kind of unnecessary, or just like set up the suspense for this character that we don't really like that much, and we'll get killed by this thing, but we know she probably isn't going to. So.
What did you think of her acting, where she was like showing how scared she was, but also how determined she was?
Well, she was better than Lala Ward, I can say that.
Yeah. Because apparently what this actress...
She was more convincing in distress than that.
Yeah, apparently what this actress did is she learned it both in England at RADA, and she learned in the Actors Studio in New York. And she combined both techniques. So so when necessary, she could do all like the genuinely convincing crying and being upset and all of those things. And but she also said about the American acting methods that a lot of it was, and this is a direct quote, a lot of self-indulgent wank. To quote her.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the genre for things like that, because obviously, you know, there's going to be different where if you're in, say, like a crime drama thing versus like a soap opera type thing. So you know, there's a lot of, you know, totally different style in terms of how soap operas encourage the actors to be over the top most of the time. Which is why when you have someone running a show that actually doesn't do that, and the press review show seems more important and serious than the typical soap opera. But it seems to go in cycles, like, because what happens is the audience sort of gets tired of that after a while. It's like, no, we bring back the campy, over the top stuff. We've had too much serious. It was too realistic, you know. Those exact words, but basically they're not happy with that. So then they let that person go and bring in somebody who brings back the over the topness, and then after a while people get tired of that. Oh, it's good to have someone serious again.
Right, yeah.
It goes in cycles, which also who, as we've talked about many times before, with times where it got kind of too scary, and then they would go a little too much in the other direction, goofy, and then they tried to serious it up again, you know, and it sort of would go back and forth somewhat over the years in that area.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, it sort of went in Doctor Who as there was certainly a stage where it went serious, silly, and then violent.
Right.
And they actually called Colin Baker's Doctor Dr. Hooligan.
All right.
All right.
Well, I'll see more of him in the sometime future.
Yes. So this is where Stephen Greif explains that he had an Achilles after because they do, as you know, because you know about Doctor Who, they do all the recording on film months before they do all the stuff in studio. And he said that before studio recording, he had got an Achilles tendon injury playing tennis. And so when it comes to the studio scenes, so for instance, all this stuff you can see him on location, and this bit is on film at Elstree, shot before. So that's him. And then when it gets to, that's not him. This is a replacement guy who walks in a rather different way, and apparently is rather flat-footed. And so one of the DVD extras is called One Robot, One New Scene, and Two Flat Feet. And then you hardly see his face in this. It's like, Travis, blow this door.
If you hadn't told me about that, then I wouldn't have known. It wasn't very noticeable. So they did a pretty good job of disguising that, as far as I'm concerned. Not looking for it.
But when you watch it in hindsight, it's quite funny.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe later on, if anything to spoil future stuff, if you wanted to show me behind the scenes stuff, I could see that too. Like,
yeah,
I
Pardon?
I was going to say I would have played the commentary for Homicide episode 1, except I remembered before I did that they have a pretty massive spoiler that they say right in the first episode commentary, because they're talking about the characters when they sort of get introduced in the show, and they talk about a particular character and be like, yeah, when he started he was like this, and then they would be like, you know, and then by the end he blah 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 blah, and they give away something that doesn't happen until the final season. So I was like, oh wait, I probably shouldn't play that for you.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to like pre-screen
right
stuff, and and with this, because the commentaries were done a long time after the recording, most of the stuff from the cast is like anecdotes and stuff, and they don't really know. And it's not like you've got, I mean, if it was like Chris Boucher doing a commentary, that would be absolute gold. But unfortunately, I don't think. Well, actually, he was in one of them, but he did it. I think he did it with the cast, and so it wasn't like I love the commentary with Chris Boucher and Philip Hinchcliffe on Robots of Death. I just thought that was great. Right then. So this is Ensor Senior, the dying scientist, and the other ones.
Yeah, I thought he was pretty good.
Yeah. So
I liked some of the effects they did with like the barriers and the little, sort of weird gadgets or extensions of Aurak or whatever you want to call them, like the little floating thing that told them to follow and stuff like that. So some of those things were pretty well set up. I'd rather have more time spent on that stuff than creatures in the tunnels.
Yeah, well, that's a bit of a Nation thing, isn't it? It reminds me of Genesis of the Daleks.
Yeah, and I love Genesis of the Daleks, so that's the one part I could probably do without.
Yeah, but it's like one of the is a huge Genesis of the Daleks is so good, but it has got a little convenience that like the two cities are like within spitting distance of each other.
Yeah, and that's kind of a thing that came up a lot. In Doctor Who is that, when they've already actually been better after one season of Blake 7, is that Doctor Who, it seemed like so much of the time, they would always be in such a small area. They'd go to a planet and then it was like, they would talk about as if this tiny little place they were in was the entirety of the planet. And that's why when you had something that wasn't as much like that, like Keys of Marinus, where they actually went to several different locations in different climates on the same planet, it seemed much more of like this epic story because they actually moved around a little bit. And it wasn't just like, everything takes place in these 3 corridors, And Blake 7 has actually managed, because they sort of have the traveling in space thing as, then going to a different planet in just about every episode, you sort of achieve that by having them, they can be in a small area of the planet, but they're always going to different places. So there's a little bit more of a, variety. At least so far. Can't say how I'll feel about, after like 3 seasons or something, whether it'll seem like they've been to the same planet under 6 different names several times or whatever. But because Doctor Who, obviously, they made jokes about how they would keep reusing the same quarries outside of London or whatever for being all these different planets.
Oh, the best joke on that, like in terms of like a spoof, was and I thought this was brilliant, and it was Bob Baker and Dave Martin that did it, where Sarah assumed she was on an alien planet, but no, she was in a real quarry on Earth.
Yeah.
In the Hand of Fear.
Right.
I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah. And I like that story a lot. That was probably, I think, my favorite Sarah performance was in that episode.
Oh, I like it because of the actress and the performance of the Eldrad character.
Yeah, she was good too.
Right, so yeah, some of the things here we've got. Now, I don't know. I don't know if this bit's a joke. Was Gan in a coming out of a bog in the opening scene?
Coming out of a bog.
Because I just heard you this. Yeah. See, that might be a joke. It's in this book that are jokes, and part of the fun is detecting the.
Yeah, I don't remember honestly. I know that there were parts where they were like kind of walking around sweating. I don't really know what it's talking about coming out of the bog, but
yeah, maybe it just means coming out of the toilet or something. Because sometimes they put bits in.
Yeah.
Because the assumption of the people who wrote this book is that people have already got Blake 7 books and will be able to detect which bits are fibs. But we've got here. Yeah, what did you think of the captain's log thing, where they sort of like recounted the previous episode?
Yeah, Morgan made a comment about like that was done, for people like to review, like 'cause it was sort of like a two-parter, so it was like, and rather than doing like previously on or last week, they just had him explain it by showing Avon stuff he already knew happened.
Yeah, I know, that was weird.
Come here and look at this. And here's the stuff that you already know happened. What do you think?
And, yeah, previously on would have worked better.
No, I thought it was. I mean, honestly, like, if I think it probably would have worked a little better if he had just said, like, okay, you know, last week when, or you know, whatever, however time it's been, like when we went down to the planet and this happened, then, you know, I thought I started to think of, you know, theorize as to what could be this, or you know. Anyway, there's ways they could have sort of worked it in without just playing the entire review thing, but you know, it doesn't. I don't think it takes away from the episode much. It's fine.
And they have a big table there for no reason, apparently.
Yeah, we've already established that there apparently are pieces of the bridge that can be kind of moved in and out and around and made larger or smaller depending on what was convenient for that particular time. So I'm just going to view it as like, you know, within the narrative of the show, to just say that there's movable furniture that they, you know, move around and try and use in different ways. So
yeah, Scene Shifters probably just made a mistake in that episode, because I don't know about this. There's nothing that will counter radiation sickness, because I heard, because I was listening to you watching it, that he wanted to go on a massive course of decontaminants, and then that bit wasn't. Oh, we've got here. We've got it says here, the ship explodes as a Space Master 5000. No. She said Space Master 5 series, something like that, didn't she? Right. Yeah. What did you think of the makeup on Ensor's chest unit? That was quite good.
I tried not to look at it too much. Right.
So it was that good.
Not very comfortable to look at.
Yeah, mushroom clouds going up in space.
Well, I mean, it's a long-standing trope, if you will, of sci-fi stuff. You have explosions that don't look like real explosions in space look, because for the most part, if you did a real space explosion, it wouldn't be that impressive to most people.
Well, one of the ways you can solve that is by, if you put the camera above the thing, then any smoke that goes up, it won't go up. You know what I mean? Like if you shoot it from above, then you're not going to have the problem of the smoke rising.
Yeah.
So, but it would be harder. So that these things can be solved.
I don't know if more modern sci-fi stuff, because I haven't really seen a whole lot in recent years, has attempted to make more realistic space explosions or not. I really don't remember anything.
Oh, I think that's
like, for movies and stuff, they like big explosions and a bunch of stuff flying out of stuff. So they tend to just.
I mean, I think that's when you should go to CGI when you're going to blow it up, because even in Star Wars Episode 1, they used a miniature on one of the things that blow. And the problem, and as you know, when you blow up a miniature, it blows up in big pieces. And it's instantly evident that it was a miniature that blew up. So it's probably best to I mean, I like miniatures. But
yeah, the scene where they were showing the ship. I guess it was the ship that the Supreme Commander and Captain Travis or whatever were into. Like, I actually liked that, even though it's like, yes, it had a fake look, but it had kind of a cool fake look to it as it was like traveling through the star system or whatever show. It was very brief, but it just sort of had this kind of cool movement to it where you're like, it you know, there's kind of like, there's sort of like an old school sci-fi look to things where it doesn't really matter that it looks fake, because it just sort of has a look to it that fits. And it was one of those. So it wasn't like something where, you know, you could see strings hanging from the model or stuff like that. It was just, you know, it worked.
Yeah, I mean, look, and of course, in the 1990s, when people would ridicule like the stuff from like 10 or 20 years before, and of course, we look at it and it's like this cartoonish CGI that's like just as bad.
It's like some of the stuff you got. I laughed at the first thing about Auric is just a computer that happens to have a wireless internet connection and thus appears intelligent. But then I have to disagree with two of the other things. They're like, Jenna does nothing in this episode. That's not true. She changes outfits and then sweats. So really,
yeah,
that provides a lot of entertainment just right there. And then I also laughed at the reference to the land of fiction.
Jenna does nothing in this. Or you could put Jenna does nothing in this episode besides look hot, both literally and figuratively.
Right, yeah, pretty much. I think I laugh every time they do the transporter thing where I wonder, how many times they rehearsed the switches that you have to flip every time you do it. And how many times does switches? Because it's like a 5 or 6 thing. It's like flip these up, flip that, do that, and then hit the button. Every time. So I'm like, I'm not one of those people. I hesitate to say nerds, but like one of those people that would pay so much attention that I'd be like, oh, he flipped number 6. It was supposed to be number 7. You know what I mean? Because you can always explain stuff like that away and be like, well, you have to compensate for the and just go on, whatever.
Yeah, what did you vote about? I like this bit here about the land of fiction.
Yeah, I laughed about that because it's referring to the mine robber thing where the actor who played Jamie got sick and they had to replace him temporarily, so they changed the script to where his face was taken apart and then rebuilt wrong.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
Yeah, and the replacement Jamie was played by an actual Scottish guy, and instead of Fraser Hines, who's English, and he actually worried legit that he would be replaced by the other guy because of that happening. They would say, "Oh, he's good, and he's actually Scottish, so we'll just leave him in the role." And this is how you lost the part: was you got sick, and we gave it to somebody else.
Oh, there. Right. Oh, right. I like the die. I can't die. Afraid you can. It's the one talent we all share, even you. Right. Now I didn't see any of this because I didn't watch it, but I don't know if you noticed things like that because you were probably too busy looking at Jenna. The camera hits a cable. This matches what Morgan said when he said it looked like the map was done by an 8-year-old.
Yeah. Funny part was first, and I'm like, well, you would have gotten there if you hadn't spent so much time explaining your map. If you just said follow me, it would have been better than now. I've got to show you where we're going to go on the map first.
Yeah, move my finger really slowly on it, I think he said.
Right. Let me break this down for you. And give them just enough time to escape.
Then you got the lizard creature. I mean, it was crap, but I think it was well shot, though. It did not show a lot of it, unlike the Merca in Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was... obviously it was a dude in a suit, but it's like... there wasn't anything established about whatever those creatures were that would make you think there's any reason why it couldn't look like that. So, I mean, it was... That's the good thing when you're basically going from scratch when it comes to these planets where nobody really knows anything about it, because they're just made up. You can pretty much say that the creatures are anything you want them to be. So there's no expectations there.
I don't know why it says Aristo again. And then the cloud. One of the things I noticed is because that was shot on film, it looked better. And I showed on the documentary, they showed what the film looked like before it was remastered. And the remastering process seems to work better on the film than on the tape, because on the film, they can just remove all the black bits and the white bits, and it looks really nice, even though it is only 16mm. But yeah, they spent quite a bit of time remastering it. Right then, so now we can do the season review, I think.
All right. Well, first, we can give our ratings for it.
Yep. Okay.
I'll let you go first. How do you rate this one?
Ooh, this episode.
Yeah.
I'll give it a 9.
All right.
Because I like the character of Aurak. And, yeah, I'll give it a 9.
I would say probably a 6. And which is, you know, there hasn't been enough, I guess, for me to really get an average rating for like 7 for me yet. But it's 6 means I enjoyed it. You know, it's not that for some people that would be like a really low rating, but for me that's only a little below average. You know, and I say average, I mean like average of entertaining stuff. Because I gave more Doctor Who stories 7 than any other score. So, and I love Doctor Who, so that tells you that that's, you know, kind of like average good Doctor Who to me is a 7 out of 10. So,
I think the reason why I gave it a 9 is that it's like, because it's about Aurak, and I like Aurak so much, and there was a build up to it.
So that's the thing with NTs, right? You're just like you're attracted to the computers and artificial intelligence. You got a thing for it.
I also heard you two being entertained by Aurak at the end of the episode.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing that was most entertaining to me is, I'm glad you brought it up before we move on to the thing, is that there's a lot of shows where there's something similar or introduced that most of the Star Trek characters would treat something, except for possibly Dr. McCoy, would treat something like that as if it was like this amazing thing that they had to be in awe of. And pretty much all of the liberals starts scoffing and making sarcastic comments about it. So it was, and then everyone just takes the power thing out. And so it's like, to me, it was great that none of them were particularly impressed by it. They're all just kind of like, you know, it's a box that's full of itself.
Yes. Ultimately, yes, that's what it is. But it's a very useful box.
Right. So yeah. So I liked that part too. So, yeah. Do you have anything you wanted to say about that Plex 7 episode, Morgan, since you walked in the room? No. Okay. All right. So season 1. I made several comments before about episodes. It didn't really grab me in terms of like the characters weren't particularly interesting, and there wasn't anything about it that really made me say, if I had just randomly seen this, oh, I got to keep watching this. So the main reason why I did was because of your recommendation of it, and so I gave what? Well, I was just okay. So Morgan was a little bit more compelled by it than I was, but I would say probably about the halfway point of the season, it started to change. I started to get a little bit more like, you know, because you start to at that point, or you know, get a little bit more into at least a few of the characters in terms of, you know, they're more interesting than they started out. I'll put it that way. Even after a whole first season, though, I find myself like not really caring about Blake that much. I mean, I'm supposed to be like the leader, but I'm not really down with him. You know, Morgan said he thought he was an ESFP or something, and I'm not saying he couldn't be, but like I don't find myself relating to him much. You know, so, and obviously not every character that be somebody I could relate to, but there's usually something that sort of I can say like, well, I see where they're coming from on this or whatever, and there really isn't much with him. It just seems to be kind of random. Like he's sort of odd, and he has this way of like he knows what he wants to do, sort of, and then he just kind of does the next thing to try to sort of go in that direction, but he doesn't really know what he's doing, which Avon points out many times. And by virtue of that, he comes off, the reasonable one, which is a little Star Trekish in that they kind of set it up a lot of times that Kirk would kind of want to do something, and Spock would be the one saying, maybe that's not such a good idea, or here's the logical way to do this or whatever. So it's a little bit similar dynamic, except Kirk would basically like knock out Blake in every way in terms of charisma and probably intelligence. So there's and Avon and Spock. Well, Avon's got more humanity because he's more human. Yeah, right. But he doesn't have that eyebrow thing that Spock has. So there's a little bit of a.
No, but he has better lines.
Yes, sometimes. Spock had a few good lines. So anyway, Jenna, she had like in the episode she was introduced that kind of gave her like a little bit better a start, and then later on she turned into like generic girl character too much. Like more. Yeah. I mean, they kind of established her as a little bit more interesting. They just turned into that, and only occasionally does she sort of do something that establishes her as being more than that. And so, and I don't fault the actress, obviously. I'd fault either some combination of writing and directing for them basically not utilizing her very effectively. And I would say that was probably the number one weakness of the show so far, is that they set up certain things where they're like, this character is good at this thing. And then times where that thing would come in handy, it's like they forget that because it's not convenient to the particular plot they're doing there. Like it's like, well, wait a minute, shouldn't we have used this and this? So if if you're going to just say, well, these people are boring and have no talents, that's one thing. And then, but if you're going to say, well, they do have these talents, but then they don't use them at times where it would make sense to use them, then it ends up seeming like a plot hole, But so yeah, I can say that if I would put it this way, if I never saw Blake Seven again and I never found out what happened, I wouldn't be heartbroken in any way. But I am interested in finding out because I can. So it's like, I'm not like, oh, I can't stand to ever watch this again. But I'm also not like, oh, I've got to see, there are some shows I've watched where the season 1 cliffhanger happened. I literally would have been like, if I had the ability to see the next one, oh, okay, I got to see what happens next. And I didn't feel that way with this. And I would say that's a minority of shows, to be fair. Like, there's quite a few that I would have had the same feeling in terms of, if I see that again, great. If I don't, whatever. That would have been my basic idea of it. But I do think it improved in the second half of the season, is what I'm trying to say. That there were the second half of the season had overall higher quality episodes, in my opinion. And again, it could just be that I started to get used to the characters or the way they did things and started to sort of adapt to that. Of, okay, this is kind of how it's going to be, and then I appreciated it more. Like in the first episode, I really didn't know any idea what to expect, so I was kind of like waiting for interesting things to happen, and then it was like the things that were the most interesting ended, because like the lawyer character that was like sort of acting like a detective and figuring out what really happened, they just kill him off. And I'm like, okay, so I mean, so it was multiple times they set up, like, or the first girl that Morgan said was cute, like they kept sort of setting up things where like, oh, this is the interesting part, and then they would just kill them, and then it would be like, okay, instead of that, we're gonna go on this ship and with some boring people. So it took me a little, several episodes after that to kind of be like, okay, there's some ways we're not always boring. But yeah, the premise was a little bit weak in terms of like I talked about at the time, the second episode, how everybody on board the ship just gets with Blake for no apparent reason.
Right.
Like if they had really tried to push that, well, people knew who he was because he was this inspirational leader and stuff like that. If they'd even thrown in a few lines that sort of indicated, well, we wouldn't do this for anybody, but Blake is this guy we all respect. But they never really did. It was just sort of like they just followed him for the heck of it because, oh well, he wants to escape and he'd probably get us killed, but hey, why? Might as well try. Seems like Avon's really the only one he ever had to convince, and then that still only takes like 30 seconds.
But
so
the prisoners on the ship do know that they're going to Cygnus Alpha, and they probably know that Cygnus Alpha is that hellhole.
Well, right, and I mean, some like
The majority of them sound like they pretty much know they're going to get shot down before they even get there.
right, the chance they might just get dumped into space anyway. So I guess most of them are thinking they don't have much to lose; they might as well try. But yeah, definitely, I would say that I have to give them points for variety in terms of like, different things they encountered because they had various weird chanting people and cults of various things in aquariums and Ewoks attacking bases, and so they kept up the variety. Some of those things were a lot more interesting than others, obviously. The one that was sort of a murder mystery on the ship was good in terms of that was probably the one that had the most like sort of interesting setup in terms of figuring out like whose agenda was what. So yeah, it had some good elements of some mysteries and certain things that weren't super predictable. So
In fact,
introduced some interesting
that
character.
episode has a phrase in that you quite like, from what I recall. Was it Mission to Destiny? Here it is. They called her the woman that you like. Here it is.
Yeah. This will be our go.
Pardon?
I said this will be our end because we got to go. But this.
All right. Okay. This is the end. It's especially when it eventually transpires the murderer is 5'0", weedy bimbo nutbag Sarah 54124.
Thing it's out there somewhere for me. I'm going to find her one of these days.
Okay.
And we'll live happily ever after. And thus ends season 1 of Blake 7.
And so it's bye
join
from
us
me
next time for season 2.
Yep.
Bye.
Yep. Right. Yep. So it's bye from me, folks, and bye from Jeff. And I apologise for any bad sound that you may hear, or rather not hear, because it cuts out. Right. So bye for now.
Bad sound.
There was bits where you were like cutting out.
Oh.
It's just getting a bit choppy.
You do too, but only when you saw it on the screen, like the pictures, some of yours sometimes. But once you were back to just you, it sounded fine.
Yeah, because I think that overload. Anyway, so this is behind the scenes technical stuff. So bye from me, folks. I'll end the recording now.